Hello and welcome to this Kantar Talk session. Across the next 30 minutes, we'll be exploring how brands can really harness the true power of their first-party data to fuel collaborative, actionable, and above all, privacy-first, first-party data customer insight strategies. Just to let you know, we are actually pre-recording this session. So through the power of the internet, we're actually live right now. So do feel free to pop your questions, comments in the Q&A box, and we're actually here live to answer them as we go through the session. So please do get involved and interact with us. So I think it's fair to say when we talk about first-party data, we often think about more transactional media activation. First-party data, I think we'd all agree, has become synonymous with post-cookie, cookieless audience activation. But to truly kind of understand the power and to get greater value from first-party data, brands are starting to become enlightened to the extended value of harnessing this to understand the greater aspects of first-party data. Behind the faceless stack of email addresses or IP addresses, mobile or user IDs, is a wealth of data that can be harnessed to truly get a better picture of market and customer and prospective customer. And that's really what we're here to talk about today. So without further ado, let me introduce our data and insight experts we have on the panel today. We have Stuart Colman, VP of Sales at InfoSum. Hello. Hi, Stu. And Kapil Sampanthan, Sales Director at Kantar TGI. So I guess before we jump into it, we should probably take a few moments on introductions. So where we're from and what our perception of kind of first-party data is, what that means. So Stu, should we start with you?
Yeah, great. And hi, everybody. I'm Stuart Colman, VP of Sales at InfoSum. InfoSum in a very succinct kind of sentence, because it normally takes me about half an hour just to tell you that. So I won't take up all the time today. But very succinctly, we're a data collaboration platform, but built on kind of a privacy-first and privacy preserving way of working, essentially allowing companies to collaborate with their first-party data, in particular kind of PII-based first-party data, gain all the benefits of that collaboration, all the value that you can generate from working together with the knowledge that you have, but without actually ever having to share any of the data itself, keeping all the data completely separate. So we overcome a bunch of the challenges that kind of come with that, and hopefully we'll kind of get into a bit of that today as we go through.
Wonderful, absolutely. And before we hand to Kapil, so how would you define first-party data? What would your definition of that term be?
Yeah, well, we could again spend 30 minutes just talking about that, couldn't we? But I think fundamentally it's about control. It's I as an entity have a relationship with an end user in some way, shape or form, and therefore I have a controlled or perhaps a nicer word, a responsibility for that data, and therefore that sits with me as a first party. That's probably the broadest way that we can kind of talk about it.
A really, really nice introduction, I think, for those people who are maybe not so au fait with the term and the market. Yeah, lovely. And Kapil, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hello, everybody. So we are TGI, Target Group Index. We are a research division that sit within Kantar Media to be precise. And what we do is we conduct a survey annually, globally, specifically in GB. It's across 24,000 respondents. And what we aim to achieve from this survey is provide understanding of consumers, in short, the who, the why, and the how, across various specific attributes such as demographics, attitudes and motivations, their leisures and interests, their product and brand usage, and most importantly, their media consumption. And to touch on the point that Rachel mentioned about first-party data, our view on first-party data is the fact that these 24,000 respondents have given us their consent to use their answers to fuel customer insight for marketing purposes. So yeah, it's a 360-degree understanding of consumer behaviour, and super excited to see how we can explore this session.
Fantastic. And I would think that probably a lot of people out there in the audience are probably familiar with TGI,
Indeed.
either through using it firsthand as a brand, or many obviously agencies and media owners have been using us for the past five decades,
That's
I think.
right, 50
now.
years, absolutely.
Not to age us. But yeah, fantastic. So it's great to have you both here today. So I think it's fair to say there's been a lot of buzz around first-party data. The term, I think Forbes at the beginning of the year said that first-party data would reign supreme in 2021. And as an industry, we see a lot of years of, don't we, across many of them. So I think it would be good for our audience today to kind of really land what first-party data means and how advertisers and how brands are actually harnessing it. So maybe Stu, with InfoSum, you can talk a little bit about what you're doing with clients and how they're seeing kind of positive business outcomes and it, actually landing it within their businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll start by prefacing with I think the use of first-party data actually can be really, really broad. I think we're only starting to understand or establish some of those opportunities now, and I think to date, we've probably been fairly narrow in our focus of that usage. I think there's a huge opportunity there. But just looking at some of those use cases, there's an obvious way in which first-party data can help to replicate some of the work that we used to do with cookies. The ability to reach the right audience at the right time. You can leverage knowledge about your consumers, targeting or activation, whatever you kind of want to call it. I think that's been something that is relatively easy to do with first-party data. There's plenty of kind of solutions out there that support that, and I think it's a nice kind of early entry or early kind of process for brands to get into. And we've seen a bunch of brands working with us, and Asda, TSB, Boots, various other companies, kind of invest in kind of that start point of working with their customer data, with that first-party data. Within InfoSum, giving people the ability to do kind of proactive targeting, to do suppression. So I want to reach this particular environment, but I'd like to not show ads to customers because they've already bought from me, so I can make my campaign more effective, and the relatively simple stuff. But using that first-party data, that knowledge on customers in that kind of proactive targeting way. I think the really interesting thing, and I think hopefully we'll get into a bit today, is kind of that kind of bigger use case or bigger opportunity for leveraging that data in understanding more about measurement, planning, validation, effectiveness, insights, learnings, all the kind of things that we can draw out of kind of working in that way. Yeah. And we're definitely starting to see a whole bunch of brands look at that as a way of transforming their ways of working and enhancing the value that they can create from that knowledge that they hold.
Yeah, and I think it's very much that new and emerging use case as to where Kantar and InfoSum came to meet, in the sense of insight is clearly where Kantar TGI has its strengths. And we found this new way of connecting our first-party data with others within the InfoSum platform. And maybe that's something, Kapil, you can kind of expand on a little, as to the role of a more traditional insight tool in a digital first-party kind of environment.
No, absolutely. And just to echo some of the stuff that Stu mentioned, TGI, as you mentioned, we've been going for the last 5 decades providing, nationally representative insights on consumer behaviour and their changing habits. And some of the stuff that Stu touched on, such as matching with records that that brand owners may have, we've been doing this for a while. We've been doing segmentation work, we've been doing CRM enrichment, so much so to the fact that the opportunity with InfoSum is to take that a step further and be able to match it with PII without the movement of PII. So the richness that we get by that is, you've got the name, you've got the email address, but then you've also got all these other attributes that TGI can add on top and help fill in the blind spots that a brand might have in its journey to market.
And I think that's a really important point you make there, isn't it, about the non-movement of PII.
Exactly.
GDPR kind of really put the stops for a while on CRM enrichment and the movement of data. The days of sending an Excel spreadsheet with your CRM on are long gone. So yeah, I think that's a really kind of important point, that InfoSum is an incredible enabler of that non-movement of data without losing any of that.
Indeed,
output.
Indeed, and if I just may add, I mean, I think what's happening with the industry right now as a whole is great, because what you had with cookie level data is, session level, browser level. You weren't able to actually understand true consumer perception or their behaviour beyond that session, and that's why consumers were annoyed with ads, and that's why rules came into place in the way in which you targeted these users. So I think with the ability to harness survey-based panel data, likes of TGI, with the first-party records that InfoSum have with their brand owners, some of the brands that Stu did mention, we have the ability to provide a more richer and clear messaging experience and determine the actual tonality that brands use so as to actually resonate with their consumer and help them achieve their business outcomes, as opposed to annoying them.
Yeah. Maybe that's a little point we could pick up there a little bit on creative tonality, and how maybe that's not always associated with more digital tech-based platforms. People often think of the targeting and the activation, but they sometimes forget that segmentation behind that can inform tonality and personalisation. Stuart, are there any examples you can think of where clients have been serving different content potentially based on different segments that have been derived from segmenting first-party data?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just take a step back from that to kind of set the scene on that a little bit, and dive into that question, is one of the strengths of an approach like InfoSum, and say it's not just us that do this, but one of the kind of strengths of the approaches is it's really important that the message that you're able to tell your consumers is one of privacy preserving and trust. Working in kind of a decentralised or non-movement of data way, means that the owners and the controllers of the data retain control of that. They don't have to give it to anybody else in order to be able to leverage it. And one of the characteristics of kind of the old ways of working is because I had to give my data to somebody else and I didn't necessarily have control of the environment that it was moving to, I'd actually kind of simplify that data or pre-segment it or restrict its kind of fidelity in order to build some protections. Those kind of obstacles have been removed in this kind of way of working. So Kantar data are able to get it at a really kind of granular level. Equally, the brand's able to open up the granularity of its own customer audiences. So we can get a lot more detailed in understanding the audiences and using that knowledge to influence the things that we then do. So, to that point, just to give you one example, we work with ITV, a great brand to work with from a kind of media point of view. Lots of people like to kind of advertise within the ITV environment. The ability to not just buy Coronation Street, which is a great way of kind of reaching an audience, but within that, then start to say, okay, within that Coronation Street audience, who are my active customers? Who are my high lifetime value, my low lifetime value? How do I then profile that by some characteristics around intent or lifestyle choices, etc.? And I could end up with 15, 20, maybe 30 different understandings of an audience in the same contextual environment, that same kind of Coronation Street environment. And I can shape my message to those individual audiences. And it can be really subtle differences around creative, around frequency, around time of day that I'm showing it, that really tailor that message to that group of individuals based on either the characteristic they're expressing to me or the value that I place on them as a result of the knowledge that I hold.
Absolutely.
So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. There's a lot of technologies out there that will allow for that kind of multi-dimensional, DCO is the old kind of phrase of it, that kind of multi-dimensional view to ad serving. And again, being able to bring in panel-based, the really rich depth of panel-based knowledge, the broad kind of media owner knowledge of their audience and what they do, and then the specifics of the client, the kind of multi-party approach. It opens up a huge range of opportunities.
Yeah, and I think one of the big buzzwords for InfoSum is collaboration, isn't it? And this is, it seems to be InfoSum and the kind of your peers in the industry seem to really be changing the dynamics of the ecosystem, where maybe it was a one-to-one transaction before, as you say, agency or advertiser to media owner. Now there's that opportunity to open that up a lot more. How are you seeing that kind of develop and the opportunities for advertisers to work with different data partners as well as media owners?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that there's always been a desire to collaborate, I think. Nobody's ever said, oh, I don't want to work with you. It's more that the mechanisms for collaboration always carried a bunch of barriers with them, whether they be regulatory barriers or trust barriers, and commercial trust has always been a challenge, or whether it's about the ability to connect data across an ecosystem. So I don't think technologies like InfoSum are necessarily bringing the desire. What they're bringing is the ability to say, actually, I now can collaborate effectively with multiple parties in a trusted, safe, privacy-preserving way, in a way that I can go back to my consumer and tell them a story that I actually buy into and believe, that they give me their data and it doesn't go anywhere. I trust them. I think what we're seeing there is we're starting to see brands understand that their value extends with the knowledge that they have beyond the obvious. So a classic one, retailers, they have a lot of transactional information. They're a brand themselves. They want to use their customer data to drive more effectiveness. More effective kind of understanding of their audience and driving for kind of purchase outcomes. But retailers can also be a great source of understanding value created within the campaign. It can be a great kind of pre-campaign kind of understanding of is this the right audience to reach, etc. So opening up those audiences, blending them with panel-based surveys that bring that huge depth of knowledge and understanding. So
maybe we could pick up on that retailer example. Kapil, could you speak to anything in the space that maybe you're doing with Kantar TGI?
Absolutely. Retailers in specific, and we are speaking to one in Colman at the minute, and it's a big challenge for them right now because there are a few of them that have a lot of first-party data records, and there are a few that don't. However, I'll give you two scenarios where, with one specific one, we're actually helping them build lookalike models based on what they already know, which is rather limited, and helping them fill in the vacuum in areas such as sustainability, because a very big topic, rightfully so, is how sustainable products are, and what people's views and perceptions are. And survey-based insights are a proved and tested mechanism to actually gather this knowledge and help marketers and retailers stock their shelves and their aisles accordingly. As a consumer myself, I've made the switch to oat milk, and I am trying to cut down on the amount of dairy. I can't give up my cheese just yet, but I mean, I always order a burger and get dairy cheese. But that said, like, if you are going to communicate to me, you'd obviously want to know how my views towards veganism are, how my views towards sustainability are, and what I'm doing, like, for example, from a holiday perspective, from a leisure interest perspective. How much carbon emissions am I emitting by going on holidays? Do I like to travel? All these things you won't know if it would not be for like survey-based insights. So coming back to Stu's point about like retailers and bringing this back in, what we're looking to do with this specific client is help them, with their growth audience segments. And those growth audience segments are basically folks that are not actually shopping with them, that are shopping with their competitors because they have more of these things addressed. And we're helping them recreate these audiences with the records they have. And at the same time, we're helping them map their existing segmentations to TGI and then pushing it back out to InfoSum for media enablement.
That's a really interesting point you make there, in the sense that I think first-party data can sometimes be saying it's our customers, we know them.
Exactly.
What is there an end point with that? But it's exercises like mapping into nationally representative databases and pushing it back in to help you identify growth segments, as you say, which is something I think will become more of interest as we go into next year, and people are really settling in with their data-driven strategies that are being powered by their first-party data stacks.
And
so
just to build on that and give another example of some of the newer ways of thinking about data, just collaboration, just brands understanding that you can work with another brand in a collaborative way. There's complementary kind of services or complementary kind of ways of working. Again, historically, that's quite difficult to achieve, but you can start thinking kind of multi-dimensionally to the way that your data applies to a market, and whether it's, say, driving greater insights, getting much more kind of granularity on the type of audience, the intent or the interest of the audience, or whether it's just working with another brand to find kind of commonality around who you don't know, shared interests, shared passions, shared kind of mindset of an audience can create huge kind of opportunity and value.
And are you seeing that typically for people outside of sector, or are people looking to do kind of data co-ops within sector? How's that kind of playing out?
Yeah, I think it's a real mixture. To give one example, without naming specifically who they are just yet, but we're working with a leading global sports brand who are looking to build collaboration across all their sponsors. They've got a whole bunch of sponsors around the world, and they're looking to leverage a whole bunch of kind of opportunities there about sharing knowledge, about sharing insights, about co-marketing, about kind of audience expansion into each other's kind of customer bases. That's very much about ultimately comes back to kind of control of the knowledge. If I know who my customers are and I know how they overlap with you, and I can then start to query that knowledge and define some insights and some value from that. If I can then leverage external sources that bring that kind of secondary layer of the kind of depth of knowledge that I can then gain, there's so much I can do with that.
Yeah, it is almost limitless, isn't it?
We joke it's just the size of your imagination.
Yeah, exactly.
And just if I may, real quick, Rachel, I mean, we've mentioned a lot about the brands and the knowledge vacuum and all that. I think one thing we should all remember is that consumers are a bit more enlightened with how their data is being used and how their insights are being used. And they might not be happy with how it was used in the past, which is why they changes, rightfully so. But I guess the trick over here is to ensure that via collaboration, as Stu mentioned, we are filling in the blocks and actually not adding layer upon layer of similarity, but uniqueness. And from our perspective at the Target Group Index, or TGI, is we work very consultatively with brands to, just ask them what their pain points are, and then ask them what they already have. And by doing so, we're putting the user's consent at the forefront. And just to give you a quick example, I mean, it's a large consumer electronics brand, once again, who we're talking to. Can't mention the name just yet. They've got a very interesting situation where they've got X amount of records where there is consent to market, and then they have X amount of records where they don't have consent to market. But the potential that we have over there is, I guess the ultimate goal for them is to reach a specific audience group, and that's gamers within the UK. And if it wasn't for the survey-based insight that we can provide them on gamers, how much they spend, how much they game per week, their preferred device for gaming, they wouldn't be able to actually build those segments. And they will have a problem, right? Because with cookies disappearing, they're not going to be able to target consumers. So they'll be sitting on a bunch of records with no consent to market. But in the scenario within InfoSum and with CGI, we're able to actually recreate those audiences and add various other layers so that they can actually, get a bit of ROI. So all along, doing it with the consumer's actual buy-in.
Yeah, and again, a very important point is when we talk about first-party data, having that consent and the frameworks that sit behind that is obviously at the centre of what all advertisers need to be thinking about, and at the same time, making consumers aware that we're not actually using their data at any point in all this. It's seed data for lookalike and for modelling. It's not about contacting Kapil
Exactly.
Directly. It's about using that data and it in the most privacy compliant way that it can possibly be.
Something that we've been adhering to well before GDPR came along, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But obviously the beauty of our partnership with folks like InfoSum is that their technology helps intentionally distort that PII before it gets modelled, right? So it's taking it to another level.
So if we can kind of return to the theme of collaboration a little bit, we're looking here at data collaboration by the sounds of it, different brands, different advertisers, different media owners bringing their data to the party. How is collaboration in the ecosystem changing between brands and their agencies potentially? We hear a lot about in-housing. It's been on the agenda for the last decade, let's say now. But how's that changing the role of agency and their client?
Yeah, certainly from our experience, I think it's really empowering agencies in a not necessarily a new way of working, but a transformation of the current way that they work. I mean, if you kind of break down what agencies are trying to achieve, they're obviously the best interests of their clients. That's what they're there for. But they're always looking to create value for their clients in unique access or in the level of service they can offer, etc. Historically, when it comes to data collaboration, that's never been the easiest thing to achieve. There's been lots of examples of agencies trying to create these kind of unified understandings of audiences they can then leverage on their clients' behalf. But invariably, it ended up with the agencies having to get their hands dirty, I guess, in terms of the world of data, and that comes with its problems around regulation and consumer perception, all those kind of things. So it's never been easy. We're certainly finding with the relationships that we have with the agency groups and their clients by extension, the kind of the non-movement of data approach to it actually gives them a lot more ability to apply themselves to the data, create insights, create value, do more with the collaboration that's possible, but not have to get their hands dirty. They don't actually have to touch the data. And they're really engaging with us on that because they see it as a really positive and progressive way of working where they can create the value and they can create the understanding and they can work with multiple parties and collaborate across an ecosystem, but not have to do the things that got them kind of nervous before. And I think that's a really positive thing. So we've had really positive relationships. And I think the brands as well, brands sat there now might be going, it sounds quite complex to work with my customer data, lots of fears, there's new technology InfoSum, what have I got to do? Actually, it's really simple. You retain control of your data, so you take that first step of kind of putting your data in an environment like InfoSum that makes it available, and you retain control of it. But the day-to-day, where are my audiences, where's the crossover, how do I plan against that, how do I buy against that, how do I learn more, etc., can be done by your external parties, your consultancies, your agencies, etc.
So agency retains as the media activator, the buyer, the enabler, as they always have done, just in a new.
If that's what the brands want, absolutely. If the brands want to do it in house, again, it's easy for them. So it's about giving them the opportunity to work with data without the pitfalls that come with working with data. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And Kapil, with TGI. Historically the relationship has been more directly with the agency, let's say, as mediator. Is that dynamic changing at all that you can see?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Obviously, we recently did a survey, the Media Navigator surveys, where we interviewed 672 advertisers, and the overall consensus from that survey was a lot of them wanted to start utilising their own in-house segmentations and their first-party data, but not just for themselves, within their business, beyond the marketing function, but they also wanted their agencies to then plan and activate based on that. So from our point of view, I mean, we've stood the test of time. We've worked with agencies, media owners, brands for the last 5 decades, right? We've transitioned from analog to digital. Our opinion over here, especially from a first-party context, is obviously, yes, we will have to, when it comes to anything from enrichment to first-party, data collaboration conversations, we'll obviously have to work with the the owner of those first-party data records, the data controller to be precise. But at the same time, the nature in which our industry works, there is a reason why agencies exist. And ultimately, their specialism is media enablement. So we've taken the stance at Kantar TGI to be agile, to permission our data for enrichment and activation, and then obviously agile in the sense that make our data available, distribute our data in the likes of InfoSum and various other data collaboration platforms so that we can, meet the need of the market in this time that's changing, obviously, how we target consumers.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, it definitely is a time of change, absolutely. I'm imagining there's quite a few people in the audience today who are either on the start of their first-party data strategy journey or in the middle of it and evaluating how it's going. One tip maybe each from you for something they might need to consider or something that you think might be important for them to be thinking about as we go into 2022, dare I say?
Do you want to go first, Stu?
Yeah, I can go first. What would I say? Probably two things I'd say is don't be fearful of doing it. There is so much inherent kind of worry about working with your customer data because they're your customers. They're the people that matter to you the most. It's the knowledge that's most precious to you. So brands in particular can get quite nervous about that process. They can also get nervous about kind of the hoops that they have to jump through to be able to work with that data. But whether it's InfoSum or others, but certainly with InfoSum, we've made that process as easy as possible. So it is that the first step is actually much easier and accessible than it ever used to be. So without question, get involved. That's important. The second thing I would say is, and don't be limited by what you thought was possible previously. Again, we joke at InfoSum that you're only really limited by the data you can get access to and the size of your imagination. Anything and everything is possible with first-party data when you are able to work in a privacy-preserving way through data collaboration, and you work with the right partners. You can targeting, insights, measurement, any forms of learning, co-ops, partners, whatever it is. There's a whole bunch of opportunity there. Dive in and really kind of let your imagination flow, and you'll be amazed what things you can learn and do and kind of move forward with.
It's that beautiful mix of art and science.
It is the art and science, and we as an industry swing between them, and actually the middle ground is probably the right way. But yeah, art is definitely part of it.
And Kapil, any kind of tips for the audience when they're thinking about their customer insight strategies and first-party data?
Absolutely. Well, that said, from our perspective, I guess Stu's touched on a lot of points. I guess let's not reinvent the wheel of consumer understanding. We're now in a digital time. We've been for the last 20 years since the big internet boom and all that. One thing that slipped everyone's radar was, forgetting the consent of the consumer. And ultimately, if you want to communicate to a consumer and message a consumer, you should do that with their consent. So, as Stu said, experiment, utilize all possible sources out there, harness first-party data. This is valuable information, be it even if it's 100,000 records or 1 million records or 10 million records. Use what you have, overlay it with other data sets like TGI or like other survey-based insights. Most importantly, layer it with user-consented data sets. Let's not forget, what got us into this place of, having to rethink strategies. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's continue to respect the consumers, and let's make sure we do it with their consent.
Fantastic. I like that. Don't reinvent the wheel. So I think we could literally talk about this all day, and we probably will go on after this session to continue to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I think we're coming to time now, so we just kind of need to wrap it up. So I think we've heard a lot here about the new world which is emerging. It's one of collaboration. It's one of actionability, which has always been an issue with insight, and it's one where the privacy of the customer, the consumer, is very much at the centre of what we do, and it needs to continue to be in order for this world of first-party data to thrive, really. So just remains me to say thank you very much to Stu Colman from InfoSum and Kapil Sampanthan from Kantar TGI for joining me today. As I say, we are live on the chat, so if you haven't already popped your questions in the Q&A box, please do that now. We'll be online for a little while longer, and we look forward to catching up with you all again soon.